Good morning. Good morning. I feel like I'm confusing everyone. I was looking back and the last time I gave a talk was on Father's Day and it wasn't supposed to be me. I believe it was supposed to be either Don or Caddy. So I felt so bad for anyone who was expecting to see Caddy talk, who I believe is so much more profound than me. And then on today's schedule, it said that all of the teachers were going to be in Chicago and you were going to get a second meditation. So there might be several people here thinking, yes, I'm going to get a chance for a second meditation. Here I am. Here I am. So I apologize for that for anyone who was planning a second meditation. I'm actually here to give a talk today, and a couple of you already know I talked to you this morning and you know who I'm giving the talk on. But I wanted to give some quotes first of this very well-known Buddhist teacher to see if anyone who does not know yet can get an idea of who this is. So here are some of the quotes. The first quote that this Buddhist teacher said was, "I think we just have to know within ourselves just how much we can take. We don't always know and we make mistakes. You know, I've made a lot of mistakes." That was one. Second one, when we start out on a spiritual path, we often have ideals we think we're supposed to live up to. We feel we're supposed to be better than we are in some way. But with practice, you learn to take yourself completely as you are. Third one, the journey to enlightenment. This is thanks to Eileen giving me this quote. "The journey to enlightenment involves shedding, not collecting. It's a continual process of opening and surrendering, just like taking off layer after layer of clothing until we're completely naked with nothing to hide. But we can't just pretend. We can't make a big display of disrobing, then putting everything back on when no one's looking. Our surrender has to be genuine." And the last one, gentleness in our practice and in our life helps to awaken the general heart of the bodhicitta. It's like remembering something. This compassion, this clarity, this openness. These are like something we have forgotten. Sitting here being gentle with ourselves, we're rediscovering something. It's like a mother reuniting with her child. Having been lost to each other for a long, long time, they reunite. The way to reunite with the general heart of bodhicitta is to lighten up in your practice and in your whole life. Any ideas who this teacher is?
I saw the book.
You saw the book.
Pema?
Pema Chodron. It's a simple yet profound, very honest, and very vulnerable approach that has made Pema Chodron a leading Buddhist figure in the United States and in our time. People go to her in droves to hear her honest, direct, insightful, yet very vulnerable teachings. Her ability to connect with others and explain Buddhist teachings while showing her own difficulties along the way enables practitioners to actually be able to relate to her, which helps them stay on the path and work with a little more ease towards the goal. Today my talk is going to focus on the life of Pema Chodron, her teachings, and how her example can help us in our daily lives. But I meant to ask, is it anyone's first time here today? Oh, several. Welcome. Welcome to Mava. My name's Tracy. I'm one of the teachers here. Anyone first time in Missouri or Augusta? Okay, so you know the weather isn't always as beautiful. So Pema Chodron's life. She was born, actually, her name was Deidre Bloomfield Brown. She was born in 1936 in New York City. She had a brother and a sister, a mother and father, and she was born and raised Catholic. She does say she didn't have, I guess for lack of a better word, a hardcore Catholic upbringing. It was more a culture and a tradition for her. She attended what was known a very prestigious school named Miss Porter School, which was in Connecticut. And while attending here, she lived on a farm in the countryside with her parents, her older brother, and her older sister. She says very much an idyllic lifestyle, being surrounded in the country. At the age of 21, at a very young age, Pema got married. Over the next few years, the couple had 2 children, and the young family then moved to California. And she began studying at the University of California, Berkeley. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in English literature, and then went on to pursue her master's degree in elementary education, which I have a soft spot for elementary education majors, myself being one of them. I believe that we learn very readily how to speak in a very simple language that people think is just for children, but I think it works well for adults as well. She taught as an elementary school teacher for many years in both New Mexico and California. But unfortunately, in her mid-20s, her first marriage dissolved, and she rather quickly remarried. 8 years later, that relationship also fell apart. She said once in an interview, "When my husband told me he was having an affair and was leaving me, that was a big groundless moment. Reality as I knew it wasn't holding together," and she sank into a deep, deep depression. And in an effort to cope with her loss, she said she explored many different therapies, many different spiritual traditions, but nothing really seemed to help the deep, deep depression that was growing within her. She said she felt as if her life had completely fallen apart, and she had no ground on which to stand on. And then she read an article by a Buddhist meditation master who she said at the time she really knew next to nothing about Buddhism. She thought it was just an Eastern tradition. She did not realize there even were any Buddhists in America. And she said this article really struck her because it gave her an idea that she had never thought of before. And in this article, it suggested working with your emotions, sitting with your emotions, rather than just trying so hard to get rid of them. And that's when she realized she was just trying to get rid of the sadness without sitting with it. She said this struck a very deep chord in her. And although she didn't know anything about Buddhism, she decided to learn more because of this article. Sometime later, she met a Tibetan Buddhist leader named Lama Chime Rinpoche, and he was a former Tibetan monk, and he's currently still a Buddhist teacher. And she had what she described a strong recognition experience. For anyone who reads her book, she's talked about that before. How when you're in your life and you encounter a person or a situation, and you have a very strong recognition experience to it. And he agreed to her request to study with him in London. So she moved to London, and for the next several years, she divided her time between the United States and England. And when in the US, she lived at a temple center in San Francisco, where she followed Rinpoche's advice to study with Trungpa Rinpoche, who happens to be the man who wrote that first article that she had read. She became a novice nun in 1974 while studying with Lama Chime in London. And then soon after that, when she was in England, His Holiness the 16th Karmapa, who's the spiritual leader of the Karma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, don't want to get too technical, but he came to England at that time, and she received her ordination from him. And she's believed, although it's not known for certain, but she is believed to be the first American woman to be fully ordained. She has been instrumental in trying to reestablish a full ordination for nuns in Tibetan Buddhism, and that traditionally has not been so. And she has led various conferences to study the matter on the inequalities between the men and women in Tibetan Buddhism. And she also received the full Bhikshuni ordination in the Chinese lineage of Buddhism in 1981 in Hong Kong. For quite a while, she was the director of a temple in Boulder, Colorado, until 1984, when she moved to a rural town in Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, to become the director of Yampole Abbey. I was very excited. I was in Halifax, Nova Scotia just last June. And they always talk about how rural it is, so I was very excited to think I would be able to see her abbey. But however, we are on the far east and she was on the far west, which was a good 4.5-hour drive. So it's not as small as people say it is. But she says she was drawn to that area based on her rural farmland upbringing and the peace and tranquility. And I can say that about Halifax, for anyone who hasn't been there. It's a very beautiful place. And that's where she continues to be the director. Now in the early 80s, she talks about a period that she became very ill. And the only diagnosis that she was able to receive was chronic fatigue syndrome. And this was right around the time she moved to the Danville Abbey and became the director. And this is also the time where she published her first 2 books. Her health gradually improved, she claims, with the help of a homeopath, meditation, and careful attention to diet. The success of her first 2 books, The Wisdom of No Escape and Start Where You Are, made her something of a celebrity as a woman Buddhist teacher and as a specialist in the Mahayana Lojong techniques. Quite a few people were very surprised back at this time to see what looked like a white Buddhist nun. So she really led the way to start changing stereotypes of what a Buddhist nun is. She said that she is very interested in helping to establish females having the same rights as males in Tibetan Buddhism, as well as continuing her work with Western Buddhists of all traditions, sharing ideas, teachings, and meditations. Some of the many books she has written: The Wisdom of No Escape, Start Where You Are, When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times, which is actually an excellent book. The Places That Scare You, and No Time to Lose, which is next on my list. Has anyone out there read No Time to Lose? I have not read this book, it's next on my list. It's a commentary on Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And from people I talked to who have read it, her commentary is quite elegant and simplistic in understanding, and it's a nice resource to read. She's a prolific author. She's conducted workshops, seminars, meditation retreats, both in North America, Europe, Australia, all over the United States. She's also a member of the Committee of Western Bhikshunis, which was formed in 2005. And she also spends 7 months of the year in solitary retreat in Colorado. So it is rather hard to see her. You have to make sure you see her when she's not in her solitary retreat. As far as her teachings, she's a leading exponent of meditation and how it applies to everyday life. And what I decided to do, she's such a prolific author and she has so many teachings. And I like the idea of focusing on one aspect of the teaching that you could actually take back with you. So I decided to give you all a handout just on one of her teachings. Is there an extra that I can see as well?
They're pretty short.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I thought I made it up copies. Thank you, Amy. Okay, so this is from an article she wrote called How to Develop Unconditional Compassion. And this is based on the Lojong teaching, which she's very interested in teaching, which for anyone, for me, if they've not heard that word, it's a mind training technique that's in Buddhism. And this is teaching actually from a book called The Great Path of Awakening by a 19th century Tibetan teacher. And in this teaching, these Lojong teachings are organized around 7 points that contain 59 slogans. And these 59 slogans remind us how to awaken our hearts. So in an effort to be concise, I only focused on 5 of the slogans for you all. But when you master these, you have 54 more to choose from. So these are the first 5. And what I did was the actual slogan is in bold, and then how she describes it is what's written below. And I thought this would be a wonderful sheet for anyone who wants to take her teachings into practice. Maybe start off the morning looking at these, and maybe in the evening looking at them again and deciding, you know, in what areas you really get some insight for the day. So the first slogan is train in the preliminaries, which are the 4 reminders. And she explains this as, the 4 reminders are, number 1, maintain an awareness of the preciousness of human life, which is actually all human life, from the tiniest little bug to the most important person in your life. Make sure you realize how precious all human life is. Number 2, be consistently aware of the reality that life ends and death comes to everyone. One of my favorite quotes, I don't remember who says it, is, remember, none of us are getting out of here alive. Very true, but it's also interesting how often we forget this and how shocked we are sometimes when death occurs in our lives. So she says this is a very good thing to be aware of on a daily basis. Number 3, recall that whatever you do, be it virtuous or not, has a result. This is karma. And number 4, contemplate that as long as you are too focused on your own self-importance and too caught up in your own way of thinking about how you are good or bad, you will suffer. So I think a nice way is just getting out of your head a little bit. Not be so focused on yourself and how you're doing and whether you're good or bad or rich or poor or pretty or ugly. The second slogan is regard all dharmas as dreams. And Pema explains this as whatever you experience in your life, whatever, whether it be pain, pleasure, heat, cold, happiness, sadness, pretend as if it's happening in a dream. Although you might think things are very solid, they are not. They are like a passing memory. Nothing solid is really happening. And I believe in the chanting we're doing later, we're actually on the month where we talk about that a little bit in the chanting. Everything is an illusion. The number 3 slogan is drive all blames into one. And she explains this, that this is advice on how to work with your fellow beings. Everyone is looking for someone to blame. And therefore aggression and neurosis keep expanding. She says instead pause. She talks about this pause technique a few times in her books, learning how to pause. Instead, pause and look what's happening with you. So instead of focusing on that person who's making you so angry, take a pause and notice what's happening within you. When you hold on so tightly to your view of what they did, you get hooked. Your own self-righteousness causes you to get all worked up and to suffer. I'm sure this has never happened to any of you all. This has happened to me. This resonates with me. So she says work on cooling that reactivity rather than escalating it. And this pause technique is a wonderful way to do so. And she says this approach reduces suffering, not only yours, but everyone else's around you as well. The number 4 slogan is be grateful to everyone. And she explains this as others will always show you exactly where you are stuck. And I wouldn't automatically think that means your loved ones. As we talked about a little bit in yesterday's teacher training, quite often people who may annoy us or anger us the most are our absolute greatest teachers and can show us precisely where we are stuck. But others will say or do something, and you automatically get hooked into a familiar way of reacting, that habit energy. And you may react by shutting down, you may react by speeding up, or you may be the type that gets all worked up. However, when you react in this habitual way, which tends to be with anger, greed, and so forth, it gives you a chance to see your patterns and work with them honestly and compassionately. Again, the pause technique, noticing what's coming up with you and just noticing it. Without others provoking you, you remain ignorant of your painful habits and cannot transform. So how lucky we all are that we have people that annoy us. That is the only way we are going to be able to work on transforming ourselves. What a wonderful gift annoying people are. And number 5, always maintain only a joyful mind. And Pema explains this as constantly try to apply cheerfulness, if for no other reason than because you are on the spiritual path. Have a sense of gratitude to everything, even difficult emotions, because of their potential to wake you up. And she talks about this quite a bit in When Things Fall Apart, about how even negative emotions provide such potential for tremendous growth within us. So I thought this would be a nice practice for anyone that would like to try. I think it's a really beautiful reminder in the morning, and then in the evening we can sit and look back on it as well. So how can we learn from her example? I think this sheet is a wonderful way of seeing how her laughter, how her humor, how her common sense words, but how her vulnerability as well is such good practice for us as well. How we can get so attached on our own selves, and are we doing good enough in Buddhism? Are we doing okay in our meditation? Whereas instead we just see ourselves as we are with the layers removed and just try to be as good of a person as we can. Her openness about her own life and her instances of her own personal falling apart helps us see the normalcy of life. How we are all somewhat in this together, and how although we might not have the same exact experiences, many of the same feelings we do have. And she's an excellent example of someone who was willing to do the work, even at the lowest point of her life, to shift and change and to create a better world around her. So I think we can learn by her example by constantly practicing at all times with joy, while being light with ourselves when we fail, not to get so into our ego that we are extremely upset when we fail. We can use this attached handout daily as a reminder of what we can do in a day, and as a checklist at night to observe how we've done without blame. And we can remember her story and her quote to end. She says she devotes her life trying to find a way to say something just so, in a very specific way, so that it resonates with other people. And I thought that would be a really nice way to end this talk. So thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day.